So what I started noticing in my breathwork practices was I would much more easily get to the state of surrender. I didn't need the long 2-3 hour breathwork sessions. I was able to do it within a few breaths, get to the same state of surrender as I did in those 2-3 hour breathwork sessions. If you know, you know. If you don't, you'll get there. But what I then started to realize was I literally had to set up my breathwork practices in front of a bed because every time I would get to that state of surrender, my mind would switch off, my body would go limp, and I would fall. And on one hand, that was beautiful. I was like, yes, I'm doing it. This is amazing. This is awesome. And then I realized, oh shit, I want to live from this presence, from this surrender, from this letting go. Yet, how am I going to do that if every time I get to the surrender and the presence, my mind is like disappearing and I am literally falling over? That's not going to be possible, right? It doesn't make sense. So I sat with that and I was really stuck and I was really like frustrated, and I was like, why does it do this? I don't understand. And as I was feeling into that resistance, into that frustration, really trying to just sit with like why the mind felt the need to disappear or run away every time, I remember a memory that came up to me. Well, a memory came up in my head. And when I was about 16 or 17, end of high school, I was playing rugby, which is kind of like American football if you're from America. And I got knocked out. So I don't know if you can actually see, there's a white patch here, which up until now, I never knew why it was created. I knew it was because of stress, but I didn't realize until now how stressful that situation really was for me and my mind. But basically, I got knocked out during rugby. I kind of remember like walking around the field after being knocked out, after being concussed, and like asking somebody for a jersey or something, like a rugby shirt. And then I blacked out again. But again, people were telling me, yeah, even after I remember blacking out, I was walking around, I was like, my eyes were open in the car on the drive home, etc., etc. The next time my mind came back to my body, or came back to awareness, I woke up naked in the bath with my mom washing me. And I'm like 17 years old, and my mom's washing me, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Right? So when I really processed that memory and I sat with it and I tried to understand it better, I realized that my mind was forced into presence and surrender back then when I was 16 or 17, when I had no idea about any of this stuff. Didn't understand presence, didn't understand surrender, didn't understand breathwork, anything like that. But my mind was physically, by being knocked out, forced out of my awareness or consciousness. Not only that, but it then started equating that with deep vulnerability, because I woke up in the bathtub naked, like my first proper like remembering of consciousness or awareness. And then here's my mom like washing me, and I like felt extremely vulnerable, right? Not that there was anything bad or wrong with that, but like I know she was doing it out of like wanting to take care of me and everything. But it was still like my mind, number one, was forced out of its position, and then woke up afterwards in like a very vulnerable position. So I realized that the mind had taken on this belief or this understanding through that experience that presence or surrender is really bad and dangerous and vulnerable, and it doesn't have a choice, basically. And when I really like understood that, I actually cried, because I felt bad for my mind. I tried to imagine and empathize what that would be like, to be forced away out of awareness and consciousness, and then also coming back and like being in this vulnerable position. And I was like, no fucking wonder the mind is scared of presence or surrender. Here I am, innocently practicing surrender and practice, but to the mind, every time it's like being forced back into that very traumatizing situation. And I was like, oh my God, of course the mind wants to disappear every time I get to surrender or presence. It's literally trying to run away. It doesn't want to deal with, or it can't handle that. So basically what I realized was the mind was equating presence or surrender with danger. And therefore it would literally only know that it had to leave. So it would literally leave, and then the tension that it held in my body would leave, and then I would collapse, right? So I did a couple things to help with this, and this is specifically with my memory. I messaged my mom and I was like, listen, I'm not saying this to like hurt your feelings or anything, but I'm just saying this to let my mind know that I've got its back. You shouldn't have done that. You should have just sat me down and waited for me to wake up properly, and not like put me in some type of vulnerable position to wake up to. I know it wasn't your intention, but I'm just setting this boundary and letting you know, only so that my mind knows I've got its back and that I see it and I understand it. And then furthermore than that, I said to my mind, I understand you now. I get it. And I am not going to force you into that position. I'm actually going to only do it when you feel ready. And the irony is, as soon as I said all of that and did all of that, and even just realized why it was so scared, the mind was therefore ready. Now, once all of this happened and I realized this, and I sort of made amends or empathized or just started reintegrating the mind, what I started to experience within my breathwork sessions then, especially when I would surrender, is my mind was more able to be there with me as I touched surrender and presence. AKA, I could still experience surrender, and the mind didn't need to or have to completely go away or disappear. Now, I'll go into an actual practice of this in another video, but the beautiful part of this, and what I'm really starting to understand in a much more profound way, is you're actually reintegrating the mind in a way where it doesn't need to be in full control. So previously, it's like the only way I could get into surrender or presence is if the mind completely left. Or when I would force myself into presence or surrender through the breathwork, the mind would feel like it had to completely leave. And as I said, that's not helpful, especially if you're wanting to live from presence or surrender. And through this integration, through this like relationship with the mind, understanding why it was so scared of being there with me in presence, I was then able to integrate it, to bring it with me. And I started being like, I want you to experience this with me. And as you do that, as I did that, the mind was able to basically sit there with me like a friend and experience the beautiful sensations and experience of presence and surrender. So basically, and I'll make a practice of this. I was able to stay upright, surrender more fully with my eyes open and my mind still being there, but without me like perceiving through the mind fully and without the mind being in control. So it's a bit paradoxical, but I was letting go enough of the mind that I could be present and surrender, but I didn't fully let go of the mind. I basically held its hand and I was like, no, let's watch this together, buddy. Like in a good way, like, come on, friend, let's experience this beautiful moment. And I was able to experience the surrender and presence while being fully like conscious, aware, and also able to like perceive it with the mind, without the mind being fully in control. And when that happened, I cried because it felt like I bonded with my mind in a way that I'd never done before. It felt as though we were friends. it felt as though we had just experienced something beautiful together. And that's completely shifted my perspective on presence and surrender and the mind, body, spirit system and all that kind of thing. So I want to invite you to really dig into, if this is happening to you, if your mind is shutting off completely during surrender and presence, specifically within breath work, but I guess in anything, and you know that is like, you're at the stage where that could be detrimental for you, dig into that. Try and understand that. Try and have a relationship with your mind, because your mind is not your enemy. It's really not. Like, I really understand this now, where it needs to be your enemy in like maybe the first part of the journey, but what you need to learn and understand is your mind is not your enemy. It can be with you. It can be with you side by side, like a companion, like a friend, without being fully in control. And that is when you have some of the most beautiful experiences. And that is when you can live from wholeness. Because wholeness is being whole. If you are rejecting or fighting your mind all the time, you're not whole. You are missing a fundamental part of you. I hope that was helpful. As I said, I'll make a video on like practices. If you have any other thoughts, feelings, or questions about this, let me know in the comments. I'll make some more videos if needed.